What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Early Read Week 8 Best Bet Show. Going to hit a few injury updates, go through some adds to the card, some player props, and of course, an underdog round robin. If you missed the underdog round robin last week, or if you tailed, pretty gut-wrenching, as I mentioned, on the Early Week Show with Nick, a great show. Make sure to check that out. UCLA, Colorado, couldn't get us to that coveted 4 out of 5 on these round robins. That really gets you some serious cash. So few top L's there. We've gone 3 out of 5 a bunch. So I actually think we've made money on these over the course of the season. It's not half the season we've gone 3 out of 5. So I think that's pretty much covered the bets. Let's hope that as the market starts to take a little bit better shape, we could get 4 out of 5 before we get out of here. Looking through, I'm recording this on Wednesday. We'll be going to the Mets game tonight. So a few more props haven't populated for me to give out like a full prop serving, but I could give a few leans where I'm thinking some ranges of bets that I'd like to get in on and a few that I will be betting myself. So let's start really fast with some injury updates. Torrey Horton for Colorado State. He's going to be out for the rest of the season, according to Jay Norvell. Justin Marshall, their running back, he left early in the win against San Jose State, but Norvell seemed a little bit more optimistic that he was going to be able to play. We'll see. Nothing confirmed there. Also, on the other side of that game, Air Force, Colorado State on Saturday night. Air Force went to their backup in full now. It looks like Quentin Hayes. Look, they played New Mexico, so pretty much everyone could score on them. But the offense may be rounding into form. Market moved about a half point on the Horton news. I think there's a case to be made he's a little bit more valuable than that. We'll see where that one goes. Colorado State, they're off a big win against San Jose State, so they can maybe get back into the Mountain West picture, at least make a run at the bowl game or something. But I'm starting to get a little banged up as the season wears on. Haynes King, he's day-to-day with a shoulder. Market being bet like he's going to be out for the game against Notre Dame, which is actually on a neutral field for you home field advantage waiters. This game is going to be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Mentioned that game with Nick. We both agree that we kind of like the under there, especially whether King is healthy or not. I don't know if you could really throw on this Notre Dame defense, even though the Irish are down their starting best cornerback, Benjamin Morrison. I don't know if this Georgia Tech offense is equipped to do that, but I do think they could shorten this game quite a bit, try and establish the run. And I don't know if Notre Dame's going to be trying to take the top off this Georgia Tech defense with the way they play. They have been running it up of late, maybe trying to get some style points for the committee after the loss to Northern Illinois, but I think that game could be a bit of a grind despite being on a fast track at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Friday night, Malik Sherrod is being diagnosed as a week-to-week injury, the Fresno State running back. That's going to hurt. They gave the ball to, his name is escaping me, but the backup for Fresno State had a pretty good day on the ground against Wazoo, but Sherrod is clearly their most talented skill position player. He's their bell cow running back. So Fresno State, short week against Nevada, who's also on a short week, going to be a little thin in the running back room, as Fresno State's been battling injuries for most of this season. Something else to note, Marshall going back and forth, it seems like, between Braylon Braxton and Stone Earl. They're off what is like easily the biggest meltdown of the season last week against Georgia Southern. They turn around. They are facing Georgia State. They're just flying through the Peach State here. I believe it's Georgia State. Marshall. Could have swore they were playing Georgia State, but I can't find it on the odds screen. Anyway, something to keep an eye on there between Braylon Braxton and Stone Earl. Braxton, more of a dual threat. I actually think he's the much better option with Earl. He's been in and out of the lineup due to injury. We'll see if Charles Huff could find an answer there at quarterback for the long term, or if he's going to keep splitting reps. Some adds to the card this week that so I talked about with Nick, and then I didn't circle back to share it on the Monday on the early week show. But the under in FAU UTSA that we kicked around, I bet that at under 55. Some market agreement there. If you picked up on that, I said I was betting it. And then Houston 6.5, 7. Those all were good. We're going to talk about Houston in a little bit as a little teaser to the underdog round robin. But I also like that as well. If you're listening, South Al, that team total did not get home. Kind of maybe overthought the angle. Troy took a ton of money up to kickoff, which made no sense to me. Had I not been involved, I would have bet South Al with the spread in that one. I made it about 11.5. I just thought that their offense could definitely cook in that one. But Troy, I mean, that was a tough look there going to the third stringer and him doing much better. But South Alabama, not a great look either, in my opinion. As for adds to the card in terms of where the market is currently at, I'm not sure there's anything else to really get involved with. 3.5's there. So Ohio, if you want to go back and listen to the early week show with Nick, another game we kicked around. Going to talk about Ohio in a little bit, so I'll circle back to that. But we're going to be betting Ohio plus 3.5 against Miami of Ohio. Really tough situational spot for the Redhawks going in to that one. And yeah, besides that, let's talk some player props here. Get the show on the road. Before we do that, let's talk about our sponsor for today's show, Rithmm. Rithmm is an AI-generated sports betting modeling app. You always hear about people with their models and their projections. Well, Rithmm gives you the opportunity to get in on that action and make some serious money. Rithmm has hundreds of different inputs that you could weigh and use in different ways to create a winning betting system. You have these ideas you want to test out. You have some hypothesis you want to try in the sports betting market. Have Rithmm help you. You could sign up in the podcast description below. Get started with Rithmm. I use Rithmm. I have their pressure run model that has been crushing for me on over-unders this season. You can get in on that too. Again, sign up with Rithmm using the link in the podcast description and get started today. Player props for week 8. Again, not a lot out there right now for me to share in terms of like pure numbers, but I could give you a few leans where I'm thinking a few matchups that I'm looking to key in on as we get set for week 8. And these I got to record a little bit earlier, so not available to me, but the Georgia-Texas props did post. Carson Beck in the mid 260s. And I mentioned this when I did the Alabama handicap. And I think it rings true. And while maybe it took a really, really advantageous game script to get to the over on his passing yards, anytime Carson Beck has been forced to throw at a high volume, he's cleared this mark of 264.5 pretty regularly. In every game dating back to last season, except for one, the Vanderbilt game, in games he's passed the ball 35 or more times in a game. He has gone over. He's passed for 265 yards or more. And when he did not do it against Vanderbilt, he had 39 pass attempts for 261 yards. So I think you could see that this range. This is expecting a median outcome. And as I discussed with Nick on the early week show, we both think that each team's offense is going to have to revolve around the pass, and each team is going to have to take to the air. And this can become a 40-plus put output from the Georgia offense. If you look at Georgia's offense this season, they're not running the ball super well. This Trevor Etienne marriage has not gone the way I think Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo would have hoped. 43rd in EPA per rush. That's great, but it's not stellar. The offensive line is getting a serious push, 77th in line yards. The passing game, though, has been incredibly potent, 22nd in EPA per pass. They've only allowed 7 sacks on the year. So I do think that this game is going to come down to Carson Beck to test that new look Texas secondary that has not faced a semi-competent passing attack. We even saw last week Beck really kind of come into his own here. 48 pass attempts against Miss State for 459. We obviously have the Alabama data point, 50 pass attempts for 439. I don't know if it's going to be that much, but what about the Clemson game? It's below that threshold of 35 pass attempts that I used, but he had 33 pass attempts for 278 yards. So I think Beck for sure. This is my favorite bet on the board. It was my favorite bet to go into it. Odds have been posted. So I like Beck over passing yards. I just think that this game, whether Georgia wins this one or Texas wins this one, I think it's going to come down to both quarterbacks making plays. So I'm heavily leaning toward, or I'm betting the Beck over on passing yards going into this one. Staying with, and if you want to look even further, if like this number gets blown out or something, I don't hate spreading the love on all three of the top pass catchers on Georgia, whether it's Lovett, Arian Smith, and Dylan Bell. They're both like in like the high 40s, mid 50s range. Like if you want to spread a unit or spread 2 units on the 3 of them or something, those 3 are obviously going to play a pivotal factor. They are correlated, but I don't know if the market, if you can game this out where let's say Bet gets steamed up into the 270s, 280s, you can maybe get some cheaper stuff by playing all 3 Georgia receivers. And I think it's likely if Beck's going over, at least 2 of those guys are going to get over and you can make some money there. So that's just like another alternative angle to look at this one. Miami, Louisville, the early game, early window on Saturday. Let's take Elijah Arroyo out for a spin again. Why not? Odds posted at 28.5. I think low 30s is also fine for this one. I mean, this guy is simply, he's on the field almost all the time. And I do think that this game is going to feature like almost similar to the Georgia-Texas game. I think this game is going to feature a ton of passing as well with the shakiness of both secondaries. Louisville still a pretty stout pass rush, I'd say. They are 21st in EPA per rush. They're 16th in tackles for loss. They've been able to get pressure on the quarterback, but where they're struggling is against the pass. They're 69th in EPA per pass so far this season. Now, look, that's going to probably mean a lot of Xavier Restrepo, but I think Arroyo continues to be almost like a big game type of player. Last game against Cal, first of all, he was on the field for 48. He ran 43 passing routes. He had 5 targets for 3 catches, but he only had 14 yards. So he wasn't able to rip one off, but 5 targets, if he's getting 5 targets again, then I'm confident he could get to, let's call it 30 receiving yards because this number is probably going to be fickle. But right now I see a 28.5, so let's call it 30. I think 5 targets, that's going to get him there. We've seen him be a deep ball threat, both against Florida and Virginia Tech. So I think that there are, especially out of a bye week, there's going to be maybe some more focus on getting creative with the pass-catching tight end like Arroyo. So that's somebody else I'm eyeing in the receiving market. Few other ones, Jaquindon Jackson. You may want to wait for Taylon Green to be ruled in, but if Jaquindon Jackson's going to be lined in the mid-70s, I think you got to play this one. I think even with Green out, maybe it's a little iffy, but because then LSU could just kind of tee off. But Jackson, I know his production has been a little bit down, but he's playing against Tennessee and Texas A&M, 2 elite defenses, like bona fide run-stopping units. You got Tennessee, who's 6th in defensive line yards, Texas A&M, who's 13th in defensive line yards. LSU, for that matter, you're starting to see a little bit of regression back. 33rd in defensive line yards, 51st in EPA per rush, 60th in yards per carry, 93rd in explosive rush rate. Last week against Ole Miss was able to run the ball really well. Ulysses Bentley went for over 100. Parrish, who was a bit dinged up, still got to 40. So I think with Green healthy, that maybe gives Jackson a little bit more leeway and a little bit more space to operate. But if he's going to be getting 20-plus carries, you got to go over here. If he's not in, maybe that kind of changes the game plan, and Arkansas is going to be on their heels a lot. But this is one that definitely caught my eye. Jackson, again, it's slowed down, but out of a bye week at home, I think that you see them really force the issue. 20 carries for 57 yards against Tennessee. Again, the number wasn't great, but the production and the volume, I should say, was there for Jackson. So that's somebody else I have my eye on as well. Another game I'm eyeing in the player prop market is West Virginia versus Kansas State. It seems like we've gotten our fix on Garrett Green over rushes because the market's now over 60.5 on that. I will say that I do think that there's some opportunity for West Virginia to take it to the air with Garrett Green and this secondary for Kansas State that Chris Kleiman said that they're going to be good to go, but like 5 DBs were dropping like flies in that game against Colorado. I know it's at altitude, they're cramping up. I totally understand, but I do think that there's something to be said that you're not going back on the road, another night game against a West Virginia offense that I won't say Garrett Green's a world beater, but I think that they're able to move the ball through the air Green, a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to that. But I do think that this West Virginia passing game is half decent. I actually lean towards both quarterback over passing yards, both in the high 100s, like beneath 200. So it's not expecting a lot of output. But this West Virginia offense, it's 39th in EPA per pass, 21st in explosive pass rate. And I mentioned last week with Shadur Sanders some of the concerns for the Kansas State defense against an offense like Colorado, but you're almost getting like a depressed number. You're getting half the price for all these West Virginia guys. It's another road game. Kansas State lead against the run, 104th in EPA per pass. So if you're looking at Garrett Green over pass at a reduced number, I don't hate that. And a receiver that I'm eyeing in this one would be Hudson Clement in the, call it mid 30s, mid 40s, wherever that gets released. Last 4 games had at least 5 targets. Most of his throws are coming in that intermediary, like downfield, 10 to 19 yards. 14 targets. That's his most target share in that one. Hauling in 10 of those catches. A lot of yak as well for this guy, Clement. They like to get him into space. So I like that as one. I mentioned 5 targets. Last week got to 39 against Iowa State, 64 the week before that, and 150 the week before that. So I'd say if he could get 6 targets, I'm pretty comfortable that he could rip off at least one explosive play. Okay. And another one that we're going to hit on, I mentioned, so Avery Johnson in a similar vein. I do think that against West Virginia, we mentioned Rocco Beck. So I do think Avery Johnson over pass isn't a bad look. I looked at over rush too, because that decreased a ton. But man, that is it's a low number at 50.5, but he did get dinged with what seemed to be a hip injury. So maybe he's not running. So maybe take a week off from the Avery Johnson rushing props. But I do think he might be able to hit a few passes in this one, especially if he's not going to run as much. He's going to be forcing it down the field. What else we got? Mentioned Jaquindon Jackson. One more. Jarquez Hunter. If he's going to be in the mid-70s for Auburn, I like this matchup for Hunter, the lead running back for Auburn. If he's going to be like that mid-70s area against Missouri. Again, these are all like leans. I haven't bet these, so don't hold me to them. But Missouri, 116th in explosive rush defense. And I think that their numbers we saw against Texas A&M, that this defensive line. Now, look, they're at home. I understand that. But I actually think this Auburn team is being a little underrated here. But Missouri, Le'Veon lost 12 carries, $138. Hunter's been getting like some serious usage for this Auburn team that's trying its hardest not to throw interceptions and keep the ball out of Peyton Thorne's hands. Hunter, so far this season, first of all, he's averaging 6 yards a pop. But, I mean, against Georgia, 13 carries, 91 yards. Against Oklahoma, 17 for 97. So against good defenses, he's been able to run the ball pretty well. So I like Jarquez Hunter. If you get like mid-70s on that, that's something I would be interested in. And I mean, Khalil Mullings, I don't know what number you're going to get, but considering he had a bit of a downturn in terms of production last week because Michigan took to a more pass-happy approach, if you get Mullings at double digits, I'd like that. He had 14 for 49 against Washington, but he's facing an Illinois defense, and we went through on the early week show why we like this matchup for Michigan against an Illinois defense that is 105th in line yards, 96 in rushing yards allowed per carry. Mullings in double digits, I think, should be able to get home there. He went for 111, 159, and 153 in the 3 games prior. So I like that setup for them. And now let's do some underdog round robin. All right, let's see if this is the one. Again, the numbers are getting a little stiff in terms of like, can we really make something happen? But like in terms of like a big payout, but there's a few that stuck out to me. Let's start Houston. I'm looking at plus 172 right now. Houston against Kansas. It's on a glorified neutral field. Houston a running dog. They're going to Zion Chris. I think this is a team with Willie Fritz that is definitely the one you want backing as a dog. I think that this offense may have found something with Chris under center. Both teams out of a bye, but what really concerns me is Kansas and Jalen Daniels, a real shaky play all season long. But to me, the best and most reliable unit on the field going into Saturday is going to be Houston's defense. Daniels, 8 big-time throws to 11 turnover-worthy plays. And this Houston defense has proven it could play at an incredibly high level against high-level offenses. Houston, 25th in success rate, 44th in havoc rate, 32nd overall in EPA per play. You also look at the other side of it. If Houston's able to implement this run-happy scheme and set up some deep shots, Kansas defensive line has been terrible this year. 116th in line yards, 104th in success rate. So I actually struggle to see Kansas getting margin here. So I think Houston can be live for the upset. Maryland, we're going to do it. We're going Maryland outright against USC. Simply put, this is just a brutal situation for the Trojans. I mentioned their schedule earlier in the week. You got at Michigan, back home Wisconsin, at Minnesota, back home Penn State. Now you're back on the road for an early kickoff on your body clock. It's going to be a 1 o'clock Pacific time kick. They're running out of bodies all over. We just got news this week that Eric Gentry, their stud defender, is going to be out for the year. He's going to be redshirting with concussions. And also Anthony Lucas, defensive line pass rusher, he's also going to be out for the year. So this all of a sudden, this USC defense is starting to look like a patchwork unit. Maryland, now look, the defense isn't anything to call home about, but I do think that they can move the ball and stay in this one. What they've been able to do is limit the run game, which again, this is exactly what Miller Moss and this Lincoln Riley team has been doing anyway, almost like a glorified air raid team. But Maryland, they're aggressive. They can make plays. They could turn havoc plays. They're 7th in turnovers gained this season. Overall, around national average terms of EPA per rush. I just think you need to start downgrading this USC team a little bit more after some of these results and where we're going in. Maryland, I think the turnover bug kind of got them against Northwestern and bloated that score line and actually giving us a good landing spot to back them at home as an underdog, a spot I'd much prefer to bet them in. So Maryland, look, I know like it's not a great look. This team was like 7.5 against Indiana on the road just a few weeks ago. Now they're 7.5 coming back against a limping in USC team. I don't know. I think Maryland's live. Ohio at Miami, Ohio. So I bet the 3.5. I'm also going to include them in the money line round robin. This Miami defense is not the same as it was when it won the MAC championship last year. This defense, they're getting 0 pass rush. They're outside the top 100 in tackles for loss, sacks, and defensive line yards. And honestly, 108th in success rate is a really bad look against an Ohio team that they want to just run the ball at will. They want to keep this on the ground, keep it simple, avoid downfield shots, just keep the ball moving. 31st in yards per carry, 64th in success rate. So I actually think they could stay ahead of the chains here on a Miami team that's just been all over the place. The offense doesn't look great. And you look at their schedule, they had a weird week 2 bye. So now what they're doing is you got Cincinnati, Notre Dame. Now you're into MAC play. They get it back last week against Eastern Michigan, whose secondary is an abomination. Ohio's defense has checked out pretty nice all across the board here. They do a decent job at limiting explosive passes, 47th in that. Overall, 28th in havoc rate. So I think this is going to come on Gabbert's arm. I think Ohio's super live to be a running dog in this one. So I like Ohio to win this game outright. Obviously, not a lot of home field here whatsoever. So I'll take the Bobcats there at plus 140. Coastal Carolina off a bye, plus 160. Last we saw them, they got their teeth kicked in against James Madison. Big difference here against the Louisiana defense that they don't want to hurt a fly. They don't want to go near anybody. This defense is awful. 7 sacks on the year, 23 tackles for loss. That's outside the top 110 in both. 128th in havoc rate and 115th in EPA per rush. So I think Coastal, with an offense that I know the James Madison game was like a really bad look, but they've been able to put up some plays here. The offensive line has been real solid. This is a team that has done a good job out. Again, that James Madison game looks like a little bit of an outlier. I trust their offense a lot more to operate at home. I just don't know where you're getting a real good data point on Louisiana. They beat Wake, sure, but what's Wake at this point? I think, a shootout game like that, I think you could see another high-scoring affair in this one. And yeah, I'll take the plus money with a team that I make this game 1.5. Like I don't really, I think there's enough variance in this game that you're getting a good offense off of a bye against a garbage defense. Might be the perfect appetite for like to turn the script here. So my dog's barking, the Chanticleers are barking, and there's 4. And the last one, when do you get to say you got Georgia plus 168 in an underdog round robin? Probably the only time you'll ever have this in the Kirby Smart era. So you got to take Georgia. You just have to. I think that we've seen time and time again this season, teams untested face their first test and get knocked off. It's not a knock on Texas. Texas is great, but I don't know if there's that much different with this Georgia team than going into the season. And the same can be said for Texas. This was a line that was Georgia's small favorite up until 2 weeks ago. Did that much change? Or was it a few bad bounces early in the game that let Alabama get a really, really big lead and then blow it only to have one deep ball go their way? I think you have to take Georgia at this type of price and put them in the round robin because there's a chance we look back. I'm talking to my guest on Monday night, posting Tuesday saying, man, there's Georgia reminding everybody why they're the best team, why they're the national championship favorite. So you got to take a shot there. So for adds to the card, Ohio 3.5. They're also in the round robin along with Houston, Maryland, Georgia, and Coastal Carolina. Great show. I really liked the show with Nick. I thought that was a great one. Really, I mean, we hit like so many games, even if it's just a word on it. So I really, really like that one. Go back and listen to that for a full deep dive into some of the bigger games. Hope you like the player props. I've been trying to continue to lean into those as the season goes on. And I know kind of limited, especially in New York, but also with what's available when I record this show. So it's a little bit trickier. But if you have any questions, hit me up on Twitter at Reed Wallach. You can find all my bets on my betstamp at RW33. And I'll talk to you guys next week.